Right, so a pro-Israel lobby group have dropped their legal action against what passes for Keir Starmer's Labour Party. So much for their publicly made threats to bankrupt Labour over this issue as well. Definitely no longer the party of Jeremy Corbyn, of course, but then this lot rose to prominence by attacking him specifically and his administration, members of whom were also facing litigation here, alongside the Labour Party itself, not only because of their pro-Israel nature, but because of their weaponisation of the issue of anti-Semitism, and indeed it is their own ardent pursuit of that has led them to wanting to sue the Labour Party sometime later. So, why has it all been dropped now? Surely you don't take on the Labour Party in court for fun. If they were serious about the scourge of anti-Semitism and they really wanted to show their pro-Israel credentials, and they clearly thought that they were in the right at one point, why haven't they seen this through? Is it all a scam by any chance? Or was the litigation just not going their way because, I don't know, they weren't getting anywhere with it? The group we're talking about here is Labour Against Anti-Semitism, the LAAS, who regular viewers will have heard me discuss a time or two before, and the litigation they were presenting was in relation to a report called The Work of the Labour Party's Governance and Legal Unit in Relation to Anti-Semitism 2014 to 2019, although it's far better known as the Labour Leaks Report. A lot easier to say as well. This was meant to be submitted as part of an investigation by the Equalities Watchdog as a defence against all the accusations of anti-Semitism Team Corbyn were on the receiving end of. The evidence the party itself had compiled in relation to tackling the issue of anti-Semitism, as well as other incidents of bullying, harassment and mistreatment that had been evidenced and documented. It never got the authorisation to be submitted in the end though, so shortly after Keir Starmer became leader, it got leaked as a whistleblower event to make sure the truth got out there, and we learned of just how dysfunctional Labour HQ were, how they were actively working against Corbyn's administration, misappropriating funds, the infamously abusive WhatsApps, particularly aimed at people like Diane Abbott. Fundamentally, it was an 860-page document evidencing the party machine, right-wing as it was, working harder to undermine Corbyn however they could than try and win an election. Now, Starmer has blown ridiculous sums of money to no avail in trying to find out not who the perpetrators actually were in the report, not finding out what they were doing in actual fact and punishing them by association with what they've been doing, but he was more interested in finding out who just actually leaked it, and even now is involved in a court case against 5 former staffers who his regime accuses of leaking the report, but for which there is no evidence really, that he's already blown some £500,000 on, and the legal bill could yet rise to some £4 million. Let's not forget here, Keir Starmer, he's a lawyer, former head of the CPS. He's been Director of Public Prosecutions, as he's infamously and repetitively kept telling us, and he's fighting a case that actually he's got no evidence for. So it makes me wonder, is he actually just an idiot who has been promoted his entire life way over his head, or is he so obsessively factional he's prepared to waste party money fighting a case that he cannot possibly win? Well, you decide. Have your thoughts on that, let me know. But at any rate, let's get back to Labour Against Anti-Semitism's part in all of this. You see, they are renowned for one thing above all else, and that's making complaints about anti-Semitism to the Labour Party. They claim to have submitted some 6,000 complaints to the Labour Party, and this was flagged up in the Labour Leaks report as an example of how incompetent the handling of complaints was, because one key passage in it showed John Stolliday, who was the then head of Labour's Governance and Legal Unit, he now works for right-wing-led trade union Unison, asked about these 6,000 cases, and he asked whether they were all in hand. Well, surely you ought to have known yourself, John. It was your department, was it not? Who exactly was running things, if not you? At any rate, reference to the organisation then came up, where the LAAS were considered problematic. It's nice, isn't it? The response on that came from Sam Matthews, later star of that John Ware Panorama farce, but at the time he was Labour's head of disputes, who told Stolliday, "We are not working with them under any sort of formal agreement. They are, however, serial complainants, mainly via Ewan Phillips. He says he has sent us 6,000 individual anti-Semitic incidents across 700 cases. While the 6,000 figure is likely an exaggeration, it's possible he might have sent us 6,000 screenshots. He certainly has not sent us 700 individual reports. There are 2 individuals who run Labour Against Anti-Semitism, Ewan Phillips and Emma Picken. A search of my inbox, legal queries and disputes, returns 157 results for the 2 of them in total." So, functionally, not only do they seem to have turned making complaints to the Labour Party into a hobby, but they aren't even honest about how many they have actually sent. And when you're exaggerating something like this, you're not really fighting anti-Semitism, are you? You're blatantly using it as a stick to beat someone with. in this case, Jeremy Corbyn and his administration. But this was all in a report that got leaked. And this is what ultimately prompted the legal action. Never mind that the likes of Phillips and Picken bragged publicly about how many reports they'd sent in. They were named in what was supposed to be a confidential report that got publicly leaked. Their anonymity had therefore been breached, and Labour must pay. It is of no consequence that Keir Starmer now leads, or did now lead by that point. We're owed damages seems to have been the thought process that went on with them. The thing is, because Labour were already taking 5 former staffers to court over the leaking of this report, when LAAS launched their own litigation over the leaking of their names, a joint litigation not just between Phillips and Picken but 7 others from LAAS as well, they also by default were taking those 5 former Labour staffers to court as well. Now, in a show of just how weak Labour's case against these 5 is, in relation to 3 of them, the Information Commissioner's Office has already ruled there is insufficient evidence to prosecute them. And in the case of one of the others, Carrie Murphy, Corbyn's former Chief of Staff, Labour were ordered to pay her £90,000 towards her costs as her name got dragged into this LAAS case. They've also had to cough up an additional near £100,000 towards all 5 of those former Labour staffers seeking to have their names struck out from the LAAS case, and more than £100,000 towards the LAAS litigants themselves seeking another anonymity application, even though the very reason they were taking Labour to court was because they'd already been publicly named. As you can see, this has been an insane case, and an insanely costly case, entirely of Starmer's own doing, ultimately. Yet now, after all of this, the LAAS case has mysteriously been dropped. So why? Well, Labour against antisemitism are keeping rather stum about it. Rather uncharacteristically for them, they generally like shouting from the rooftops about what action they've been taking. And this news actually came out on the 12th of September. It's gone almost completely unreported. And the only thing the LAAS Twitter page commented on that day was its disgust at former Tory MP Rory Stewart, saying the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn by Labour were disgusting. They themselves feeling it was disgusting Corbyn had not been expelled, par for the course with this group. But no comment at all made then or since about their desire to bankrupt the party being dropped. It doesn't even convey a message along these lines on their own website that makes any mention of this. And I mean, video footage of them bragging about bankrupting Labour was put out by UK Lawyers for Israel, and Novara Media happened to cover this, and they got threatened with legal action if they didn't take the video down from their article, having been threatened with a copyright suit. And that's just after said lawyer's account locked the video, preventing it from being viewed any further. It's all very strange and very suspicious. And given the silence on their part in this case, I would suggest it's likely they didn't have a cat in hell's chance of winning, since they'd waived their own anonymity on such complaints themselves. But equally, there was placation from this on the Labour side too, where they thanked LAAS for everything they do, and even had one of the other litigants standing for them in the local elections earlier this year. They'd actually imposed this person in Brighton and Hove, though thankfully she lost. Having closer ties between the Israel lobbying right-wing group and Labour been enough to close this legal matter, is a closeness and a better dialogue kind of put this matter to bed? And is that why it's all been shut down? Have LAAS received some sort of behind closed doors concession from the Labour Party? Will we ever know for sure? Well, the one thing I do know is that even our mainstream journalists have ignored this story, save one article in The Guardian, buried, so even they are keeping quiet by and large, and their silence, their failure to draw attention to this, is in and of itself a political move being committed by the media. Because if we don't know anything, we don't hear this happening, we don't ask questions about it. And we should all be asking, what is the deal here of Keir Starmer's Labour? And what exactly is your relationship with Labour against anti-Semitism now? What do you think's happened? They are basically on the same page when it comes to Israel, this group and Labour. Have they buried the hatchet over it? Is that all it comes down to? Or did LAAS not really have a legal leg to stand on anymore? Do share your thoughts on this story in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily, of course. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation which might add another angle to this story, where back in July it emerged that Keir Starmer has put pro-Israel interests in charge of Labour discipline now. And with the Israel lobby now having a veto on expulsion appeals, that's resulted in a 100% failure rate. Funny that. I'll hopefully see you on the next vid though. Cheers, folks.